Hey everyone, welcome to the Gimme Vendcast episode 7. I am here joined by Cecil Ledesma. Hey Cecil.
How's everyone? Hey Evan, how are you?
Good. Doing great actually. And today you and I have discussed and are going to discuss a really interesting and fresh topic to the industry today, and that is characteristics of successful teams and operators out in the industry, and from companies in general. So Cecil, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when talking on this topic?
Wow. My mind is racing because, drawing from past experiences and where I find myself here today. And there's always the sports analogies from being part of teams, which is a great lesson,
Sure.
by the way. But I think, customers constantly are trying to solve problems for their customers.
Yeah.
Internally, when there's, not very good times, if there's like an internal revolution of sorts, it kind of, sets everybody on fire. And it's like, this house is on fire, it's burning. What do we do?
Right.
First thing you need to do is relax, right? And I think a lot of that guidance will come from leadership. The leadership team sets the tone, it sets the vision, it sets the objective, and their real day-to-day task, not just once a year during annual reviews or quarterly reviews, but it's that constant reminder that I will lead by example, and hopefully I can inspire enough of my team to inspire the others in their teams, and I think that's that goes a long way to say, hey, this company has so many problems. I think you define the most pressing people problem, and it starts with input from every employee and making the results of that very public,
Right.
versus trying to be very political and and stay anonymous. I think if we're solving problems and trying to get better, right, we need input from employees. We need to identify the most pressing people problem. Do we have a problem with retention, efficiency? Are we not engaged with customers enough? Defining this problem, I think, first step, right, towards creating some positive change. What do you think?
Well, I think I guess the way I think about it, especially from a leadership quality perspective, I 100% agree on the looking internal to, the way the system is working, and find, as a leader, part of that leadership quality is finding the gaps, because when it comes to employees from, and everyone gets into this, but it's like working in the business, working out versus working on the business. And in some roles, they're super involved within the business tasks, which is nice for not needing to think about the external factors that affect necessarily the job or the role or the industry. But then every once in a while, especially as a leader, you have to be able to think on the business too. And part of that is looking internal to, as the way you've explained, listening to customers, listening to employees, trying to find the changes that need to take place. But one that also comes to my mind first is the external factors, kind of the vision of the company. I mean, that one's maybe that's an overused term for a leader to bring the vision, but in a more tangible sense, the way I think about that is in our industry, for example, in the food service industry, I think it is easy to get locked into the business and thinking about your customers and serving the consumer, and making sure that snacks are stocked, drinks are stocked, and everything's there. And it's very busy work. It's very laborious to be out there and make sure that's happening all the time. So all cylinders are running. But it's and maybe like trends in the industry are one way to think about it, but It's when could someone have seen micro markets happen 5 years before one was ever created? How do the leaders have the vision of how the industry will change over time in order to start finding the levers that need to be pulled to prepare for that change? And that's the foresight that's, I think, a really difficult job to maintain, because it's hard to be paying attention to all of the things that won't even have a tangible value for 5-10 years from now. But to be able to prepare your company in the right way for those bigger momentum changes, I think can be so powerful. It can set your company way ahead. And if you don't see it and you're getting hit by the waves of either new technology or new people or a new generation of people or whatever it might be, you can get caught blindsided. And I think we've seen that happen in our industry as well.
Right. That constant tug of war.
Yes.
Right. It's like,
yes.
What is priority? And you could be butting heads with folks on your team that have a difference in opinion as to what priority is. So who sets the tone? Right? Is it the owner of the company? Is it the general manager who's been around for 30 years? Do they establish all that? The people are starved for recognizable leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to quote from your ethics manual, but I think actions speak in any business. In this industry, actions speak. I'll give you one example. That article that you actually posted about Cuyahoga.
Oh, yes.
And that to me is, look, we work extremely closely together. For you to say, listen, here's what you need to do, right? And if you do the following, you're going to be fine. The customers will be pleased, that et cetera, et cetera. That's you telling me, right? Mm-hmm. But there is less of that in our relationship. There is less telling and more showing, more doing. You've always been that example to me. You get up at 3, you get up at 4 to route ride. You think nothing of it, when most people will fight you tooth and nail and say, I'm not getting up at that hour. I think you go out of your way, and I'm sure I'm not the only one you're showing this great example to, but sure. It just shows that, hey, I could never ask anyone to do something I'm not willing to do myself. That's a successful characteristic, I think, and it goes long term. It goes well beyond the next 5 months or 6 months. Sure. It's like it's very contagious. And it also sends the right signal. So, we're rambling through some characteristics as we're talking about. I mean, we're uncovering them, right? Leading by example, being that example for others to follow, to realize that, hey, I need to be doing more than just talking about things, right? Get out of that building. You and Corey put out a blog post. What appears to be years ago, right? Learning from that, I came across that article, which is it's perfect, right? Because the customers aren't here in my office; they're out there,
right?
And so there's almost that comfort level that, hey, I'm in my secure element,
right?
It's not going to be coming to us. We need to go chase it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the, it's comfortable to work from a workstation for sure, but I think you can gain so much more out of being on site many times. And I think, and thank you. I think, it's one thing that, and I think it's for me, a lot of the reason I think about doing that is, it really has to do with understanding the customers. And this would apply to any business or business owner for that matter, for, anyone in a leadership position. It gets comfortable to work from a workstation, have a team able to handle the laborious tasks and just things like that. But everyone's always got something on their plate. But The in-field experience, though, it really can't be beaten because you can learn things learn things faster because it's people to people. And so especially for an operator where you go on site to talk to some of the customers and the products they like, the products they don't like, you could learn that just by asking a couple people or by looking at a micro market or something just to get the insights, rather than trying to search everything from the office. And yes, there's probably more time involved in travel to get those things done, but many times some of the just simple answers you need can be attained by doing just that. And it's amazing how many times that becomes clear every time, like you said, every time you get out of the building. And maybe it's one small thing that leads to many others where you need the time and the scope to work on something for 8 hours in a day, but taking that day every once in a while to just learn and be a sponge to the industry or to your customers or your users or whatever it is, and just take in the feedback can start to give you so much. And that's one of the reasons I do it, but I guess I would also recommend that to other leadership positions to, I guess not that they shouldn't trust their team's word, but it's more like a double check and verify, or just simply experience it for yourself. And I think it's a good practice in probably any industry for that matter.
Strong characteristic.
Yeah.
2 words, be there, right?
Be there. Mm-hmm.
Be there not only in the lives of customers,
right,
but also be there in the lives of people that you're trying to affect.
Right.
If it's your leadership team, if it's an inner circle, if it's a close circle, we're not a very large company and action with such a small company. But is that almost by default that, hey, it's easy to have good engagement when you're small? But I'll challenge that thinking, that just because you're large, you can't have engagement. I think it's not only committing to being there for employees, not only committing to physically listening, right, with an open, sympathetic ear,
right,
but choosing, freely to say, look, here's what we set out to do early on in the year, and my pure joy is to see every one of this Gimme team or this A team or B team or whatever company team to be truly successful. Not just the money, but where they can grow as if they're sales, then they're growing in business development capabilities. They listen better, but all that is harnessed, and it's you have to cultivate that out of every employee.
Right.
And it starts by being there. Mind, body, spirit. Show them that. I think successful teams will always have somebody that they can look up to as setting the path for them. So critical.
Right. I 100% agree. And that's, I think, like you said, it's a little more lead by example. That's almost, like you said, being there by nature, I would say, in many ways. It's, walking in the same shoes, but also guiding and, providing a path to follow in every role to make sure that, one, I think every individual understands what success looks like in their current role, but also in future roles of development. And I think that can speak volumes. And I guess one of the, interesting positions I think of for our industry, because I think we described teams very well and how teams can be successful by having good leadership with the right leadership qualities, understanding their roles and what that, what growth means for them. But kind of one of the big questions I hear now, this is specifically related to operators in our industry, is you mentioned, Cecil, finding or talked about finding A players and building a stellar team, and how do you keep encouraging that and finding the right people? What would what do you think could help operators find the right type of talent that they may be looking for? And I know that it's becoming harder to seek out. How do they find the top talent they're looking for with route drivers in a role that is typically laborious in both an hours and physical work? What are some of the ways, and I've seen some techniques, but what do you think could help operators find the right people for those roles?
I think you start organically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's easy to put a want ad out. It's easy to do a job posting out, but again, it's the luck of the draw with what you get back. I'm sure you'll get lucky every now and then, but I'm a firm believer in growing a team organically. Other folks that may be needing time to mature in their development, they may come up later on, but drivers know drivers, and drivers that know of other people will be your best advertisement,
Right.
because it's so easy to lead by that example. They see how the drivers are faring with, you know, where they're currently at, and let them do the recruiting, you know. So
right. Yeah. Well, and I love that approach. I like the organic approach too. And I think, like you said, drivers know other drivers. And other thing that I think of, and maybe there's a way to combine the two, but I read this one in the Predictable Revenue book by Aaron Ross, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
The lines in that, it's one section of it is try to empower, it's about salespeople, but try to empower your salespeople to think like mini CEOs, right? Or
Right.
to be your own boss is kind of the common term for that. And I think there are ways that operators can do more of that with the route driver position. I think there's been a lot of the technology add-on. I think there's a lot of focus on efficiency,
Right.
and with too much focus on efficiency and less on like quality, for example, I think that actually translates to the type of person as well. When you have less of a focus on quality and more on efficiency, when you think of things like fast food, I think they ran into a lot of that heat, right? Where you get the McDonald's, the Wendy's, like traditionally fast food, it could just be garbage, right? But like it was just the efficiency that was so well and worked so well. And then people start thinking about wanting to be a little more health conscious or healthy and with the trends. And then I just saw Wendy's thing today. It was like quality is our recipe or something like that, which I just would have never really thought of as Wendy's. Is like my first engagement with them. So it's a totally different spin on the typical fast food. So I guess my point is the way that fast food has had to sort of reinvent itself to be healthy or calorie conscious or just think of themselves as like, okay, but we are quality too. With the route driver position, with micro markets, I think it's actually helped that effort because a lot of operators I've heard is micro market drivers are actually different than vending drivers in many ways. Micro markets and vending drivers are a little bit different because micro market drivers are merchandisers and they have more SKUs to pay attention to. But I think the more that becomes blended and hybrid routes are created, that I think will continue to evolve. So route drivers today is not just driving a truck, lifting products, and getting in and out as fast as possible. There may be ways to empower the driver to think more like a merchandiser. And when it comes to filtering out between A players and B or C players, or however you want to do that, I think you just have to look in different places versus maybe, like you said, organically, but also thinking about the store managers and product managers and things like that. That even though it's not exact translated position, if you can pitch the route driver position as you are in charge of these customers and making sure they have the right products they need at all times, and have some control over what goes in the location just because you know them best, I think operators are better fit for that type of person, because we just talked about get out of the building, be on site. No one is there on site more than the drivers. Why would they be the least concerned with, or why are they being maybe positioned as the least to do with what's going into the markets and the machines, and just be super efficient? I think it's in the big picture, it might be less efficient to have someone back at the office who doesn't know them as well as the drivers, and then removing the drivers from the process altogether. It almost, the more I talk about it, the more it doesn't make sense. Right. But maybe there's a trick to it, and I think we've seen both. We've seen operators work in different ways, but the more we just talk through it, it just starts to make less sense. We just said the best experience is being there. So a leader goes out once a quarter to their customers. The driver is there every day. Right. He or she should know that place best.
I think the drivers being considered and treated as purely drivers, right, I think is a mistake. This is a bold statement, right? Drivers, I love the drivers. The drivers need to be recognized and seen as, for lack of a better descriptor, your frontline brand ambassador, because they're there every day, right? So are you looking for just another driver? That's just another body that you can fill, or somebody that could almost like literally think on their feet, has a personality? Because let's face it, companies will interact with the driver more times than they will with the owner.
Right.
And so that reflection of a driver that truly buys into, here's our long-term goal, and here's ultimately the kind of value that we believe we're driving for all our accounts, that becomes pretty powerful. If you want just a body to drive a truck and bring product into that account's building, you'll probably find a lot of people like that. But I think that's what's changing with the times, that, hey, they're probably wearing multiple hats. They have capabilities that are beyond what you probably hired them for. They're frontline ambassadors that actually will carry the flag right into the accounts building.
Right. I love it. Well, if we had to recap our characteristics, it sounds like we have kind of three major thoughts. The first one is be on site to listen to your customers and learn directly from them. Number two, it kind of translates right into it, is as in the leadership positions, lead by example for your team as well. Being able to put yourself in the footsteps of their roles, to let them know that you'll be there for them every step of the way, and be there being the term in that case. And then number three, there may be ways to empower certain roles, like in an operations perspective, like a route driver, to think like mini CEOs and actually become their, or roles that traditionally are efficient focused, but actually become sales focused and growth focused, and put a growth mentality into their positions. It's kind of a long-winded way of saying the 3 points, but go on site, get out of the building, be there for your team, and empower team members to think like mini CEOs, I think would be a good way to put a bow on it. So we'll see. I love the topic this week. Everyone, this was Gimme Vendcast episode 7. We will see you next week with episode 8.
Great.
Thanks.
Evan, thank you.
Thank you.